The screen flickers to life, revealing a tired man in a worn jacket standing at an ATM, his young daughter clutching his hand. "I just want to see my balance," he whispers, voice breaking. The elegantly dressed woman behind him rolls her eyes, tapping her designer heel impatiently. Neither of them knows that in 30 seconds, both their lives will change forever. If you've ever felt invisible in a world that only values wealth and status, this story will remind you why appearances never tell the whole truth. Like, subscribe, and join me on this journey that proves sometimes, the richest people aren't the ones with the most money. Mark Jenkins shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the worn soles of his work boots barely providing any cushion against the hard tile floor of Capital First Bank. The Friday afternoon crowd was typical, a mix of professionals rushing to deposit their paychecks and wealthy clients being ushered into private offices with offers of espresso and pastries. Mark belonged to neither group. "Daddy, are we almost done?" 6-year-old Lily tugged at his hand, her voice small but carrying in the marble-floored lobby. "Almost, sweetheart. Just need to check something." He squeezed her tiny hand, noticing the fraying edge of her coat sleeve. Another thing he needed to replace soon. The line for the ATM moved at a glacial pace. Mark checked his watch, 3:45 p.m. He had exactly 45 minutes to check his balance, figure out if he could afford Lily's asthma medication this week, and get to the school to pick up his son before aftercare fees kicked in. Behind him, a woman cleared her throat dramatically. Mark turned slightly, catching a glimpse of immaculate blonde hair, a cream cashmere coat, and diamond earrings that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Some of us have actual appointments," she said, not bothering to lower her voice as she checked her watch, a gleaming Rolex that caught the light. Mark nodded apologetically and turned back around, pulling Lily closer. He'd learned long ago that arguing never helped. Not with bill collectors, not with his ex-wife's lawyers, and certainly not with people who viewed his existence as an inconvenience. When he finally reached the ATM, Mark punched in his PIN with fingers calloused from his construction job and the side gigs he picked up on weekends. The screen loaded painfully slowly. "I just want to see my balance," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The woman behind him let out a derisive laugh. "If you have to check, it's probably not good news." Mark's cheeks burned, but he kept his eyes fixed on the screen. When the numbers finally appeared, he blinked hard, certain he was seeing things. He pressed the balance inquiry button again. The same number appeared, $2,457,603.28. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was impossible. Just yesterday, he'd had $46.72 to last until next Friday's paycheck. "Sir? Are you finished?" The woman's voice cut through his shock. Mark turned, disoriented. There's something wrong with the machine." "Of course there is," she said with an eye roll. "Look, if you're done, I'd like to." "No, you don't understand." Mark gestured helplessly at the screen. "It's showing over $2 million in my account." The woman, Alexandra Winters, CEO of Winters Financial Group, scoffed and stepped forward, fully prepared to show this disheveled man the door. But as her eyes fell on the ATM screen, her perfectly composed expression faltered. "That's..." She trailed off, her manicured finger hovering over the numbers displayed. "Impossible, right?" Mark said, his voice barely audible. Alexandra's financial instincts kicked in. "Have you made any unusual transactions recently? Received any inheritance? Insurance payout?" Mark shook his head. "I work construction. I make $22 an hour when there's work. This can't be my money." Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart." He quickly pressed the cancel button, took his card, and stepped aside. "Sorry for the delay," he mumbled to Alexandra. But Alexandra wasn't listening anymore. Something about the man's genuine confusion had triggered her professional curiosity. In 15 years of wealth management, she'd seen people react to sudden windfalls, lottery winners, inheritance recipients, lawsuit beneficiaries. This man's bewilderment was too authentic to be an act. "Wait," she called as Mark headed for the exit, daughter in tow. "You need to speak with someone about this." Mark paused, uncertainty written across his face. "I can't right now. I have to pick up my son from school." Alexandra glanced at her watch again, but this time with a different calculation in mind. "I know the branch manager. This could be a serious error, either in your favor or the bank's. You need to address it immediately." Mark looked down at Lily, then back at Alexandra. "I really can't miss picking up my son. The late fees." "I'll drive you," Alexandra heard herself say, surprising even herself. "After we speak with the manager." 20 minutes later, Mark sat stunned in the branch manager's office as the truth unfolded. 3 days ago, a wire transfer had been deposited into his account from Westridge Development Corporation, his current employer on a luxury condo project. "This appears to be a legitimate transfer, Mr. Jenkins," the manager explained, reviewing the documentation. "Though obviously the amount seems unusual." "It's a mistake," Mark insisted. "I'm just a site foreman. I don't even deal with the financial side." Alexandra, who had inexplicably remained for the meeting, leaned forward. "Could it be some form of profit sharing? Or perhaps compensation for something?" Mark shook his head. "No, nothing like that." The manager made a call to Westridge's financial department while Mark sat rigid in his chair, one arm around Lily, who was now coloring with crayons provided by a sympathetic teller. When the manager hung up, his expression was puzzled. According to their records, this transfer was authorized by the owner, Mr. Harrington himself. It's marked as Project Jenkins Compensation Package. Mark's brow furrowed. "Richard Harrington? I barely know him. He visited the site once, maybe 2 months ago." Alexandra watched Mark carefully. In her world, unexpected millions usually came with strings attached, or worse, were the result of criminal activity. But this construction worker with his worn boots and gentle way with his daughter didn't fit any profile she recognized. "I need to pick up my son," Mark said, standing abruptly. "Can we freeze this or something until we figure it out? I don't want to get in trouble." The manager nodded. "We can place a temporary hold on the funds while Westridge confirms the transfer was intentional." "But Mr. Jenkins, if this is legitimate." "It can't be," Mark insisted. Alexandra found herself following Mark and Lily out of the bank. "I offered you a ride," she reminded him. Mark hesitated. "That's really not necessary. Your daughter is shivering, it's starting to rain, and you're about to be late picking up your son." Alexandra unlocked her Mercedes with a click. "Consider it an apology for my behavior earlier." The drive to Oakwood Elementary took 12 minutes, 12 minutes in which Alexandra learned more about Mark Jenkins than she'd intended. He was 34, had been raising 8-year-old Ben and 6-year-old Lily alone for the past 3 years since their mother left, worked 60-hour weeks, and still struggled to cover basics like Lily's asthma medication. "The insurance only covers part of it," he explained as they pulled up to the school. "And her inhaler is..." "Dad!" A small boy with a backpack nearly as big as he was came running down the steps. Mark got out and embraced his son, checking his watch with visible relief. 2 minutes to spare. Alexandra watched through the windshield, an unfamiliar feeling settling in her chest. In her world of hedge funds and investment portfolios, human connections were transactional. Mark's obvious devotion to his children was disarming. "Thank you for the ride," Mark said when they were all back in the car. "You can drop us at the bus stop on Maple." "I can take you home," Alexandra heard herself say. "That's really not. I insist." She met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Besides, I'm curious about this mysterious transfer. Professional interest. Mark gave her his address reluctantly. As they drove through progressively less affluent neighborhoods, Alexandra noticed both children growing quieter, as if sensing the stark contrast between her world and theirs. The apartment building on Elmwood Avenue had seen better days. Concrete steps were crumbling at the edges, and several windows were patched with duct tape. Mark thanked her again, clearly eager to end this unexpected interaction with a woman so obviously from another social stratosphere. "If you find out anything about the money," Alexandra said, handing him her business card, "call me. This could be life-changing if it's legitimate." Mark pocketed the card with a nod. "I'll return it. Whatever it is, it's a mistake." Alexandra watched them climb the steps, Mark carrying Lily while holding Ben's hand. Something about the scene stayed with her as she drove to her penthouse across town. The next morning, Alexandra found herself thinking about Mark Jenkins while her personal trainer put her through her Saturday routine. The mystery of the unexpected millions nagged at her. In her position, she'd seen countless wealth transfers, but never one so inexplicable, or to someone who seemed so genuinely uninterested in wealth. Her phone rang just as she was finishing her protein smoothie. Unknown number. Alexandra Winters. "Ms. Winters? It's Mark Jenkins. From yesterday." Something in his voice made her sit up straighter. "Did you learn something about the transfer?" "Mr. Harrington, the owner of Westridge, he's here. At my apartment. He wants to talk to you too." 30 minutes later, Alexandra's Mercedes pulled up outside Mark's apartment building. The sleek black Bentley already parked there seemed as out of place as she felt. Mark opened the door before she could knock. The small apartment was clean but cramped, with furniture that had seen better days. Richard Harrington, a man Alexandra knew by reputation in business circles, sat on a worn couch, looking surprisingly at ease with a cup of coffee in his hands. "Ms. Winters," he greeted her. "Mark tells me you've taken an interest in his financial situation." "Professional curiosity," she replied, accepting the coffee Mark offered. "A random multi-million-dollar transfer isn't something you see every day." Harrington nodded, his expression serious. "It wasn't random." Mark, who had sent the children to play in their bedroom, sat down heavily in a chair across from them. "He says it's not a mistake." "It most certainly is not," Harrington confirmed. "Though I understand your confusion, Mark. I should have prepared you." Alexandra watched as the older man set down his coffee and leaned forward. "2 months ago, I visited the Lakeside Towers project. Do you remember that day, Mark?" Mark nodded slowly. "You were inspecting the structural work on the east wing." "Yes. And while I was there, I witnessed something." Harrington's voice grew softer. "You stopped a beam from falling on one of the new architects, a young woman who was on her first site visit." Mark shrugged uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "Perhaps. But what you didn't know was that the young woman was my daughter, Emily. She was working under her mother's maiden name, wanting to prove herself without my influence." Alexandra watched Mark's expression shift from confusion to dawning realization. "The transfer," Harrington continued, "is a token of my gratitude. Emily is my only child. She means everything to me." "But, $2.5 million? Mark stammered. Sir, I can't accept that." "You can, and you will," Harrington said firmly. "I've spent my life building wealth, Mark. What good is it if I can't use it to thank the man who saved my daughter's life?" Alexandra found herself studying Mark's face, the genuine discomfort with this sudden windfall, so different from how most people would react. "There's something else," Harrington added. "Emily told me about your situation, single father, working multiple jobs. The money comes with no strings attached, but I would like to offer you a position in my company. Something with regular hours, good benefits. For the children's sake." Mark looked overwhelmed, his hands gripping his knees. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Alexandra heard herself interject. Both men turned to look at her. Speaking as a financial advisor, this is legitimate, Mark. And your children deserve stability. Something in Mark's expression shifted as he glanced toward the bedroom where Ben and Lily were playing. They do, he said quietly. The conversation continued, details were discussed, and Alexandra found herself increasingly involved, offering advice on how Mark should invest the money, suggesting trust funds for the children's education, recommending financial planners who wouldn't take advantage of his inexperience with wealth. When Harrington finally left, promising to have his HR department call Mark on Monday, an awkward silence fell between Mark and Alexandra. Why are you helping me? He finally asked. Yesterday in the bank, you couldn't wait to get away from me. Alexandra considered the question, surprising herself with her honesty. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What's that? That wealth isn't always about what you have. Sometimes it's about who you are. She gestured around the small apartment. You have nothing by my world standards, but your children look at you like you've given them everything. Mark's expression softened. They're all that matters. I know, Alexandra said, realizing she meant it. That's why I'm helping. 6 months later, Alexandra stood in the doorway of a modest but beautiful home in a good school district, watching as Mark supervised Ben and Lily in the backyard garden they'd planted together. The changes in their lives had been significant but measured. Mark had insisted on making thoughtful decisions with the money, focusing first on healthcare, education, and security for his children. He'd accepted Harrington's job offer, now working as a project manager with regular hours that allowed him to be home for dinner with his kids every night. The rest of the money was carefully invested, with trusts established for the children and a portion set aside for a foundation Mark was creating to help other single parents. They look happy, Alexandra commented as Mark joined her on the porch. They are. We all are. He handed her a glass of lemonade. Though Ben still asks when the fancy lady is coming over again. Alexandra laughed, surprised at how comfortable she'd become in this family's life. What had begun as professional curiosity had evolved into something she'd never expected, friendship, and perhaps something more, though neither of them had rushed to define it. You know, Mark said, watching his children play, I used to think being rich meant having money. Now I know better. Alexandra nodded, understanding completely. In her years of managing wealth, she'd seen countless millionaires and billionaires who were spiritually bankrupt, chasing more zeros in their accounts while their personal lives crumbled. The real wealth was inside you all along, she teased, bumping his shoulder with hers. Mark laughed. Sounds cheesy when you say it like that, but yeah. Though I won't pretend the money hasn't changed things. Lily hasn't had an asthma attack since we got her on the right medications. Ben's reading at grade level now with the tutoring. And I sleep at night.
Alexandra watched as Lily ran across the yard, her laughter carrying on the breeze, no wheezing, no struggling for breath. Ben followed, confident in a way he hadn't been when she first met him. You know what the strangest part is? Mark said quietly. That day at the bank, when I just wanted to check my balance to see if I could afford Lily's medicine. I was prepared to sell my father's watch, the only thing of value I had left, if the answer was no. Alexandra thought about the man she'd been so dismissive of that day, how she'd judged him based on his worn clothes and desperate eyes. How wrong she'd been. I'm glad you didn't have to, she said simply. Mark smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Me too. Though sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been behind me in that line. Alexandra considered this. Harrington would still have found you. Maybe. But would I have known what to do with his gift? Mark shook his head. You guided me through all of this, Alexandra. You could have walked away after satisfying your curiosity. But I didn't, she said softly. No. You didn't. His hand found hers on the porch railing, warm and solid. And that's the real miracle in all of this. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the yard where two children played without worry for the first time in years, Alexandra Winters, who had spent her career helping the wealthy become wealthier, realized she'd finally found something her money could never buy: a family.